Welcome to this edition of Phenomenal Health. I'm Dr. Jeff Hawkins. Today we're going to be discussing vaccinations, which is one of the most emotionally charged and controversial subjects in the country. If you have children and are thinking about vaccinating them, or you're an adult and you're thinking about getting the flu shot, then you better stay tuned. You're really going to love this show. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Welcome to Phenomenal Health. Phenomenal Health is informative and exciting. Phenomenal Health interviews leading experts in all areas in healthcare, so you become a much more informed consumer. Now, here's your host, Dr. Jeff Hawkins.
Hi, welcome back. I'm Dr. Jeff Hawkins, and you're watching Phenomenal Health. I'm very fortunate to have with me today a true legend in the chiropractic profession, Dr. Ted Koren. Dr. Koren is the founder of Koren Publications, which is the largest supplier of patient education tools for doctors, and he is the developer of the Koren-specific technique. He is here today to talk about vaccinations. Dr. Koren, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Really appreciate you coming on. So, first of all, why don't you tell the people that are watching what kind of got you involved in the whole topic and subject of vaccinations? Because I know you're really an internationally known expert in this field. So tell us how you got involved in this way back when.
Like so much in life, it was personal. My son was born.
Okay.
And although I didn't want to have him vaccinated, I didn't feel good about it. I had studied a little bit of it. In the back of my mind, something was saying, am I really doing the right thing? Is he somehow unprotected? Is it worth bucking the school system? Is it worth dealing with my mother-in-law?
Right.
Why shouldn't I vaccinate him? So I started studying the literature. I started studying the scientific research on the subject, and I opened up a can of worms. I realized what the public is told is far different from what the scientists and medical doctors tell each other.
Now, are other parents in the country and in the world questioning vaccinations too, or is this just something that's only a few people are doing and you kind of brought it up? And
people have always questioned vaccinations. However, now the numbers are increasing greater than ever before. The Wall Street Journal mentioned that about a quarter of all parents are concerned about the shots that are being given their children. And now with the research coming out, tying in vaccination with autism and developmental disorders and learning disorders and retardation, parents are now starting to ask a lot of heated questions, and many parents are refusing vaccinations. And then, you know, there's a new world when medical journals themselves are discussing how do we handle this issue with patients. Before it was just, I'm the doctor, I'm doing it, that's all. Now they're questioning. And a large number of medical doctors are questioning vaccination. They are not buying the party line.
now here's the million-dollar question. You know, are vaccinated children healthier than unvaccinated children? Because that's really the bottom line. You know, if what they're saying is true and that vaccinations work, then they should be healthier than unvaccinated kids, right?
You got to the heart of the matter. All parents want to have their kids have a procedure, whether it's vaccination or anything, because they want the child to be healthier.
Right.
And yet you'd think there would be loads of studies showing that vaccinated kids are healthier than non-vaccinated kids. There's not a single study showing that. Not one. There are increasing studies showing the reverse is true. It's the vaccinated kids with autism. It's the vaccinated kids with allergies, with asthma, with neurological problems, with weaker immune systems, with personality disorders, with cancer. Not the non-vaccinated children. Recently there was a big study on the Amish. The Amish do not vaccinate. There should be hundreds of autistic children in the Amish communities. There's zero.
Interesting.
And now the increasing studies are showing that, for example, one study from New Zealand in the journal Epidemiology, this is all peer-reviewed studies, showing that vaccinated children have 25%, in the group they studied, 25% had allergies or asthma. The non-vaccinated kids they studied, zero. And this is studies from all over the world saying this.
See, and the crazy thing is, too, because I've studied this as well, and I totally believe in what you're talking about, because I don't vaccinate my child, and I used to teach my patients the same thing. But the thing I really found interesting is if vaccinations really do what they say they should do, then why aren't the pharmaceutical companies doing studies comparing vaccinated kids to unvaccinated kids? Because, you know, if they're confident in what it would show, then you think they'd want to do that to squelch anybody who's anti-vaccination.
Well, they may have done it, but they've never published it. We don't know.
Right.
I forget the term. It might be called dry labbing, or there's another term that they're using in which they stick the study in the drawer and they never send it out to the journals to be published because it makes them look bad.
Right.
They do it with pharmaceuticals all the time, and there's articles in journals and in medical texts talking about this real severe problem that if a study shows a drug or procedure doesn't work well, they just don't submit it.
So
They'll only submit the studies that make them look good.
So it doesn't support their theory, what they want to have out, they just put it in the back door and that's it.
Absolutely. And you see this is very common. And there's increasingly, there's articles, there's studies, there's a lot of discussion on the questions, why are our children so sick today?
Right.
We're supposed to have such a wonderful country, food, wealthy country, especially compared to other countries. Why are our kids so sick? Look at all the special ed classes. And if you talk to special ed teachers that have been around a long time, like try to find one that's about to retire, and say, is it any different from when you started? And they'll look at you like you came from Mars.
Right.
Say, oh my God, when I started, we had just a few. Now they're all over the place. You know, there are schools now that are totally devoted to special ed, not just classrooms. When I went to school, I remember there were 3 kids in the entire school, and when I was in elementary school in Brooklyn, 3 kids that had special needs, as they say.
Right.
Now, then classrooms are full of them, and it's destroying the budgets. Where did this come from? Why are our children so ill with chronic illness? We never had it before. And vaccinations, it didn't happen until we started vaccinating.
Now, one of the party line things that the medical profession says about vaccines is that, well, yeah, there is maybe a little bit of risk, but, you know, the risks outweigh the benefits,
right.
You know, or do they?
No, the benefits outweigh the risk. That's what they say.
So, is that really true? Do the benefits outweigh what they say is a small risk?
That gets to the heart of the matter, because people will do a procedure if they feel they'll benefit by it, and the chance of getting hurt are very small and minimal.
Right.
And years ago, people would say to their doctors, what's the chance of my child being paralyzed or injured from a shot? The doctor would say, it's 1 in a million. And yet, studies started coming out. It was 1 in 160 in one study of a child having nervous system damage. Right. Dr. Harris Coulter, the world-renowned medical historian, says that the odds of a child being seriously damaged from a shot are 1 in 5 or 6.
That's
and
incredible.
I think Coulter's work, this was from about 15 years ago, 20 years ago, is low. Right. Because how many kids have allergies today and asthma, and how many children have neurological problems? It's about 1 in 2. And they look at this and they say, oh, well, maybe it's the pollution. Right. But we find out, for example, a friend of mine practices part of the year in Cuba. He lives in England. He says in Cuba, you look up in Havana and the sky is clear. Says there's no gas, there's no cars, there's no smog, there's no pollution at all. And yet everyone's got inhalers, or a large proportion of the people have inhalers, or if they can't get them, they just suffer from asthma. He said, but they vaccinate. When the communist regime took over, they instituted mandatory vaccination of everybody. Now there's a horrible asthma epidemic in Cuba. However, if you go to some cities that are horribly polluted, like Mexico City or Jakarta, Indonesia, asthma is almost unknown because they do very little vaccination there.
Right.
So
now what about polio? Because that's something when I used to talk to people, you know, about my philosophy in vaccination. What about polio? Polio was cured by vaccines, so they think, well, vaccines are great because polio is gone. Talk about polio. That
has to be one of the biggest lies the medical profession has ever promoted. Polio was always known as a disease caused by toxic chemicals, by lead arsenate and other pesticides, and heavy metal poisoning. Polio was first noticed after spraying was done downstream from various communities. Kids started getting acute flaccid paralysis. And by the way, it's still all over the world, and it's called acute flaccid paralysis. Why isn't it called polio? Because the polio shot got rid of polio. Right. So even though they have the same symptoms, it's not polio.
Right.
But polio was known to be caused by pesticides and toxic poisoning. And in fact, at one time, I think it was in the 1930s, England was threatening to ban all imports of fruit from the United States because it was causing paralysis in their children. Paralysis in children started to disappear when they started changing the laws regarding pesticides and got very stringent. In fact, the Salk vaccine came out in 1955. But by then, polio was a third of what it was in 1952. Right. With no vaccine, it had dropped by 2/3 because they stopped using, or they started to decrease the amount of pesticides. And it's really bizarre because polio was not a disease of poor nations. You know, epidemics would appear among the sick and the filth and the squalor and the poverty. It happened in wealthy countries.